Right, hello everyone, and welcome to the Partnership Scrutiny Committee meeting. I've got the usual blurb to read out first. So this Scrutiny Committee meeting is being conducted on a hybrid basis in accordance with the Local Government and Elections Wales Act 2021, which will operate alongside the Council Standing Orders. The Council Standing Orders and Code of Conduct will apply at all times, and members should conduct themselves accordingly. Please can those attending online switch off your cameras and mute your microphones when you're not speaking to ensure there's no unnecessary background noise. Can I also remind members to ensure the chat function is switched on and to use that facility to indicate to me when they wish to speak on a particular item. Please don't speak until I invite you to do so, and remember to unmute your microphone and switch your camera on. A recorded version of this meeting will be uploaded for public viewing as soon as possible after the meeting. Whilst translation of proceedings can be provided upon request, and the images and sound recording may also be used for training purposes within the council. So, welcome everyone. First item on the agenda is apologies. I know we've had a couple today.
We've got apologies, Chair, from Councillor Screen, Hussain and Councillor Jones.
Thanks very much.
Chair, if I could just come in there, Rhys Cornwall is with Estin, receiving feedback at the moment, so he'll join us later.
That's a poor excuse, but thanks. Do we have any declarations of interest at this point? Okay, thank you. So the only, not the only item on the agenda, but the only organisation that we're looking into today is the Norse Joint Venture Partnership. So pleased to welcome, sorry, Sarah and Kate, isn't it? Yes. I believe you're going to do a presentation for us first and go through the reports. Is that right?
Yeah, so if I introduce and then perhaps colleagues will walk us through the report and then we'll take any questions.
That's lovely.
Okay,
Thank you,
Chair.
Tracy. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, councillors. And I also know a Cabinet member, Rhian Howells, is planning to join online. So I think she's held up in traffic and hopefully will join at some point. As you said, we've got the two assistant directors here, Jake and Sarah, and I'll come to them in a sec. I just wanted to set some context. The Newport Norse is a joint venture. It was set up originally for 10 years and has been extended slightly to allow us to do a review. So we're not talking about the review of the joint venture tonight, but colleagues in the room are involved in that review. And we're currently working with Cabinet and colleagues at Norse towards a new model that will replace the Newport Norse joint venture. And, you know, keen to see that develop in the future. But for tonight, if we could keep the questions to the current Newport Norse partnership performance.
Yeah, we discussed that a bit earlier on. I'm just going to introduce just a second as well, just to welcome the Cabinet member, Councillor Howells. So welcome.
Evening. Hi, sorry I'm a little bit late. I had to get back from the Civic to the house and I got stuck in traffic, but
no problem. We discussed that.
Great.
Apologies.
Thanks. So the report we've got in front of us is the Newport Norse performance over the last year, and it also touches on kind of the profit that's been returned to the council in the life of the joint venture as well. So I don't know, Sarah, Jake.
Yeah, so we're going to share sort of talking through the report. I'm just going to give a bit of background about what Newport Norse is for those that maybe are not so close to the partnership. Touching on then the actual financial performance of the business over the financial year 23-24, and then Jake will talk us through some of the social value aspects of what we can bring from the business. So Newport Norse is a joint venture, public-to-public partnership, obviously between Newport City Council and Norfolk County Council. As Tracy said, we commenced in 2014. We deliver a number of property services to the council, including building maintenance, compliance, cleaning, estate management, valuation, design and construction procurement, project management and management of the council's corporate estate. As we said, I'm Sarah Davis. I'm one of the associate directors. I look after the professional services side of the business. So that covers the estates section, building, surveying, construction projects. And then Jake, my colleague, is associate director for FM and support services. So since the inception of the JV in 2014, the business has continued to grow, increasing its turnover year on year and expanding its workforce. When we began, we had around 200 staff. We now have over 300. We also provide additional services to the council due to the increasing demands for service delivery. An example of that is some of the work we've taken on with the housing team for temporary accommodation in the city. The report that we've produced, as we said, will give you the annual performance for financial year 23-24, touching then on particular focus on social value. So in terms of financial performance, just going back to the beginning, just to sort of give a comparison, turnover at inception in 2014 was just over 4 million. So for the last financial year, turnover has increased to 29.8 million, and that is also up 19% from the previous financial year. In terms of rebate, at the first year, the rebate we gave back to the council was 69,000. For the last financial year, we were able to make a rebate of just over 886,000. In terms of the overall contract, we've made rebates of circa 4.9 million, and we expected a further 700,000 in this financial year 24-25, subject to obviously achieving our business plan and the objectives we've set out within that. As I said, as well as the financial benefits, the report has a particular focus on social value. Jake's going to go through how that has been measured and some of the activity that we do to achieve that.
So in terms of measuring social value, the report gives some background as to what social value is and how we talk about it, because it can be difficult to quantify. So Welsh Government set up the Wellbeing Future Generations Act, and from that then there comes a national comms framework, so themes, outcomes, measures that help to capture activity and steer it towards how it's measured in those 7 themes that come out of the Wellbeing Future Generations Act. Newport City Council colleagues, so Richard Higgins Procurement, then worked to set up Newport City Council's TOMs, their measures and how they interact with our business. So there's a framework set up by the council, and some of them will apply to Newport North and some of them won't. But on page 16 of the report, some of this background is before that, but on page 16 is a table, and that lists the measures that have been agreed between Newport City Council and the North Joint Venture and our performance against them. What those measures attempt to do is to capture and quantify social value in some way, and this is normally by proxy values. So the proxy values are set up by the council in line with Welsh Government expectations and such. Some of them are yes, no, so having a union recognition in place is just a yes under the framework, but some of it will convert activity or hours and things into a quantifiable financial measure. That's laid out on the table and provides a bit of a snapshot of kind of the work that happens, not just in Newport North and the services we provide and the work we do by virtue of the business, but also some of the extra activity that we aim to do on top of that. So things like work placements for young people from schools and stuff. Each year then we produce a social value dashboard. So our first one last year, and that is on appendix, number 2, which is on page 21. This is just a little bit more of a visual way of us presenting that data so that we can use it to talk to the council colleagues and the colleagues with the North Group. Some of the, if I give some examples of some of the activity that feed into this dashboard, are things like the apprenticeships we run. So we have 7 apprentices currently in another one to advert, including 1 degree apprenticeship which is a partnership with the University of South Wales. Other training opportunities that we present to staff within the business, so development towards HNCs, HETs, things like that. But also things like school placements and they're not just school placements, long-term work placements with partners like Careers Wales and the council. The table in the report summarises that and gives that a financial value, but it isn't the same as having a number of hours and that's the cost base of somebody. It's a proxy value that's decided by the council. In terms of our interaction with the City Council and that social value, that's developed a lot over the years. There was a lot less activity at the start of the joint venture, and as we work together, we've got a really robust system now in place. I often use work placements as a good example here because it's become a really good process. Done a lot of work in this financial year this report covers with Careers Wales and pupils who are struggling academically, and what opportunity there is across the North to come into a business and interact. Some of the social value stuff.
I was just going to finish off by just touching on the objectives that we put in our business plan 24-25. Just so you can see sort of what's going to happen over the next financial year. Obviously, we're a number of months into that, but so the objectives include to achieve a turnover of 19.9 million. You will know that is lower in the current year. That is due to the timing of some capital projects coming forward. Like I said, we're hoping to achieve a rebate of circa 700,000. Obviously, one of the big pieces of work will be to engage with NCC regarding the transition to the new entity, which we're already actively involved in. Obviously, to embed our approach to social value even further into the business, reflect Newport's commitment to carbon net zero, and to sponsor and support the hire of further apprentices. That's just some of the key focuses for the current financial year.
Okay, thank you both. I'm just going to ask the cabinet member at the moment, Councillor Howells, was there anything you wanted to say before we go to questions? Any comments you wanted to make?
No, I don't think so. Nothing at this point, but happy to answer any questions that you've got that you want to direct towards me rather than, towards North or Tracy.
No problem. Thanks very much. Well, we go straight into questions then and comments. Councillor Marshall, I know you had a couple of questions you wanted to start us off with.
That's great, Chair. Thank you very much. So the first one actually relates to the rebate. And the question is a two-part, and that's given the current cost of living crisis and obviously cost of inflation that we've seen over the last 12, 18 months, and Newport North's potentially higher service costs, how does the rebate model benefit residents of our city and the taxpayers? And have alternative cost-saving models been seriously considered, or like model-driven ways, or rather than having a rebate, is there any other ways that could be suggested to improve the way that it functions and works, please?
Thanks, I'll take that, Chair, if I can, because Newport North are responding to Newport City Council setting up of that model, and the way the model has been set up is to have a rebate. I think in the first part of the question, there is an argument that the rebate benefits public sector because the whole of that rebate does go back into the council and to the parent company, so it's wholly credited back to the public sector. And of course, that's a credit in our budget that we then use to spend on other services or to reduce the cost of assets. So there is that argument. However, in the scrutiny review of the model and subsequently the report to Cabinet on that, it was recognised that that isn't a model we want to see in the future and that alternatives need to be sought. The final detail of that hasn't yet been set up, but will be by the end of the current North joint venture. And I think I can confidently say it's extremely likely that that won't have a profit element in it, and that there are some challenges for that in our budget, Councillor, because currently there is an income line that then nothing goes in on that line, so there's some budget rework in there. But rather than the credit coming in that way, using a social value scorecard, monitoring against the Newport City Council TOMs and considering other methods of social value, that is a little bit outside of the scope of the current joint venture, however.
Thank you. And just a link with that, with the breakdown. So any finances that come back in terms of the rebate goes into the general pot and not into actual, like, back into schools, things like that there in that aspect. But I'm just trying to think of the question I was going to say. So I've lost my train of thought actually on that one. So no, sorry. So when a customer is basically coming towards North with an idea and they get a quote and things like that there, from personal experience of different contacts, things like that in different places, they've noted about sometimes the higher pricing of it and whether or not that links in to whether or not that competes to ensure that there's a rebate that comes back on. So it's kind of basically paying higher to make sure that there's a rebate. So it's whether or not we're kind of biting off our nose despite a face type thing. I don't know if there's any comments to kind of reassure the situation in that regard from what we've heard and come across to what maybe is, actually at the main front of what happens operationally.
some of that may be linked around the terms and conditions of employment for our employees. So often we have feedback of a similar nature. Sometimes we have a number of groups where we interact with the council, one of them being the education liaison board. So there's a group of representatives of primary schools and secondary schools who meet with us and we discuss these sorts of issues. And when we often talking about comparative jobs or prices, sometimes it's around the overhead cost of our business because of the terms and conditions that we present to our staff. So the local government pension scheme is still open, or the staff have the option to opt into that and pay the the real living wage rather than national living wage. It's things like that that obviously feed into those quotes. And sometimes when we've gone and compared two quotes or we've got a price of work from elsewhere, it's been that the work being done or the employees' pay isn't quite the same as ours. Obviously, I would need to look at an individual example, but
You're right.
our feedback has been
To come in there, and also that compliance with those higher standards. So, for example, things like the living wage, and we require Newport North to pay the local government pension, the living wage, and so on and so on, which does render actually sometimes the price to be more expensive than an apparent similar alternative. The profit model, I don't think we can discuss really, because we've already agreed that we wouldn't do that. That was set up 10 years ago. We wouldn't do that today, and we're reviewing that anyway.
Thank you for the explanation. Obviously, it's just something that keeps, as you can imagine, in different roles that we have as councillors and we speak to people. It's about, something that comes up there repeatedly about various things, as you probably know from previous reports and things like that there. Chair, I don't know if you are happy for me to move on, or if just as pause, just to see if anyone's got any back-off questions in relation to that.
That's a good idea, actually. I got a feeling Councillor Hughes was going to have something similar to ask. Councillor Hughes? You're on mute.
Apologies, Chair. Thank you, Jake Azera, for turning up. It follows the same theme, and I'm glad that our officers have given an explanation to, because one of the one of the questions I was going to ask really was around that social value model. I think we did, so when you look at the report itself, it's the actual rebates to council is quite significant in that as a focus. And I think, I'd be interested to hear your views around whether it goes back to the survey that you said where you had a 90% customer satisfaction, really. So if you look at that 90%, can I ask first what was the percentage of clients' feedback on that sort of survey sample? If I could ask that first.
I have to go back to the detail on that. I can submit that.
Yeah, because if I'm being, if I'm being particularly honest on this one, it's not really reflective of some of the feedback that we get as councillors in the communities, and one of the issues there around that is whether the focus has been very much on the rebate and not actually on the customer satisfaction side of what the value for money that the actual client feels they're getting on the other side of the. So I'm glad that we are looking at that, because I also think that ties in as well to work that needs to be done, and this is particularly for officers, and I'm sure it's being done, is how are we interpreting that Tom's model, because I think it feels quite simplified and it feels quite difficult to audit and scrutinize on the basis of the information that we're given. And I think there's a difficulty for me if the value for money is very much focused on the rebate. We know that there's some things that you mentioned about the wider value under the Tom's thing, but then somewhere in that chain it feels like there's people at the beginning of the chain who wouldn't feel the same sort of joy, really, as it were, about value in that. So I'm just wondering whether that's the part for me that the report I found a little bit difficult with the report, because quite rightly, it's great that you're giving a substantial or increasing that rebate to council, and we all welcome that. But then, it's that balance about where that cost comes from.
That's it. I mean, some of that was a statement, I guess, but just a few things that occurs to me, and do correct me if I'm wrong, those colleagues. Firstly, not all of the sectors of the business draw a inverted commas profit or rebate. So, for example, there's some really great examples of schools who previously didn't use the Norse cleaning model coming into Norse. So not everything has a inverted commas profit element to it. I can only repeat, I think if we, the council, were setting up a model today, that profit return wouldn't be part of it. It was then. Currently, it is a target that the company are kind of asked to meet until the end of the model. So I don't know that we can critique the Norse colleagues on that. I guess I think where you're getting to there, Councillor Hughes, is also, I'm going to call it kind of the poor fit of the social value with the model. And what we're seeing there is since the start of the review, so over the last 2 to 3 years, again, correct me if I'm wrong, we've made clear that the new model will have social value in it, and therefore, huge chunks of the company will move into that. And therefore, we've really encouraged Norse in partnership with us to start reporting more and more on social value. So just to try and start to work with those TOMs. It doesn't naturally fit with a value return model. But it is important because culturally we need to move that way. So it is a step towards that new way of working, including the social value scorecard, because it's not just about TOMs, is it? It's also about how many apprentices do you have? What living wage do you pay? What local companies do you use? All of those social value elements. And I think I'm right in saying up until about 3 years ago that wasn't measured.
Yeah.
And we're bringing those along to the point of the new model where the profit element, the value return element will be removed. But they are a poor fit. I answered all of the questions. Is there anything more?
You did. That's really reassuring as well, Trace. Thanks for that. But the one thing I would say in relation to that is that the profit element you mentioned is taken out of schools, and maybe one of the biggest criticisms we have about the whole model comes from schools. So it might be worth digging into that as well somewhere in the journey.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. Have you got any other follow-up questions on that?
No, that's absolutely fine, Chair. Thank you.
No, thanks. I've got a question on my own, actually. I mean, it's to do with that table with the TOMs and the measure. You did touch on this, Jake, actually. I don't know whether you're able to go into any more detail, but it's getting that monetary value from the measures. I mean, when I looked at it, I wondered whether it was just a simple thing of just taking the hours multiplied by the living wage, but you've already hinted that's not the case.
They are proxy values, so they are set by Newport City Council. So making procurement here, and there's been our contact for that. And this is not an illustrative example. I'm going to use some made-up figures, but let's say for every apprenticeship week that the business employs, that generates the £280 worth of social value. That data comes out of Welsh Government and out of people in the social value realm. That then is what gets grossed up into these figures. So we take the number of weeks of apprenticeship employment, say, times that by a proxy value, and that gives a financial social value benefit. It isn't necessarily linked to wages or to stuff like that.
Right, so the proxy value is pretty well set by the council, you say,
Yes,
and then
yeah.
based on Welsh Government data?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Thanks. I can't actually see any other hands at the moment. Have we got further? I'm sure we have got further questions. Just nobody's actually showing at the moment.
I do, Chair, but I'm waiting, but I'll let other colleagues in.
But well, Councillor Davis got in just fractionally before you. So, Councillor Davis.
Hi, thank you. I mean, thank you, North, for your report as well. Just a couple of questions I've got, but which is mainly regarding staff. Looking at the social value dashboard, you say 92% of staff live in Newport, which is absolutely great. But that would mean then that only 9% of that was actually employees from Cardiff Capital Region. But I'm a bit lost then, where you've also got on that dashboard with regards to monetary value. It doesn't seem to be right
Yes,
with regards to the employees.
yes, I actually had, if I can answer that, I had that question myself. So that is because the proxy values for Cardiff Capital Region and the Newport City region, or the coastal region, are different. So when you look at it, you think, well, one should just add into the other, but it's because those proxy values are different, because one is a subset of the other. I'd have to default to Newport City Council colleagues as to the makeup of how that's got to. But yeah, I had that same question.
That's answered one of my questions as well. So.
Yes, so just to confirm that, so Newport City Council have adopted the same, also coming into our kind of family of tongs. There is, as I understand it, I'm not an expert on tongs, but there is a much bigger set, very significant set. And in the council, the cabinet have agreed to this smaller set that's appropriate for us as a council. So what we've suggested to Norse is they report on the same set of values. And I agree that is confusing. I think that question came up last year at scrutiny, but we're keen to model the Norse value against the council values, because we can include that in our overall reporting.
Thank you. Another question I've got, if I can ask, Chair, with regard to ethnicity. I notice on your graphs that only 51% actually answered that question. Also then, just below that, you've actually listed the different nationalities. What I would have liked to have seen, even though you've done a graph, I would have preferred as well to have seen within that list how many of each nationality there is. Because I think that would have been easier for me to look at and understand, perhaps other than the graph that you've got above. So that was just an observation that I wanted to put across.
Thank you.
You can provide additional detail as well, extra detail.
I guess it's important to say as well, sorry, I speak for you. Important to say as well, that wasn't in the report at all last year, so that is a scrutiny, maybe yourself, councillor, scrutiny asked last year if that breakdown, so that can be put in, so that's an addition, but we recognise that, yeah, we could do some more work to get step through, yeah, detail.
Okay, thank you for answering my questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Davis. I was going to come back to you, but if you're done, I'll just ask my question anyway. Just following straight on from that, it's that ethnicity pie chart. As Councillor Davis said, 51% answered, so 49% obviously didn't. That's a huge percentage that didn't answer. And presumably then the second pie chart that's next to it is based on a breakdown of that 51%. Yes. So I don't know whether you're able to answer this or not, but I mean, have you got any idea why nearly half of the respondents just didn't want to answer that question?
We had a very similar figure last year when we provided this after scrutiny. This was a question of scrutiny, and we submitted it afterwards. When we pulled that data from our people system, our biggest group was have answered. So in terms of capturing that data, that goes out as part of onboarding. So when somebody joins the business, there's a number of forms. They used to be paper, they're still a paper option, but they are largely electronic. But they're not mandatory as part of the group process. And it also doesn't, why somebody doesn't. So I know that the group have themselves been working on the EDI, equality, diversity and inclusion data themselves. So there have been other waves of reminders out to people to, if you want to complete the survey, please do. But again, it doesn't ask people why they don't. I wouldn't be speculating, but it could be that it's another reason not to answer, or it could be that people don't feel comfortable for some reason. I wouldn't like to say, but
yeah, I mean, the reason I asked the question, I knew the answer was going to be almost impossible, to be honest. But the reason I asked the question was because I just wondered whether or how representative then the second pie chart is, because of how,
Putting
and
in
if there
those
maybe is
charts.
a cultural reason why certain people don't answer it, then that's going to be completely skewing the second. So, but yeah, I understand it's going to be impossible to answer because it's not mandatory. So people just, if they ignore it, and you don't know why. So, Councillor Marshall, your turn.
Thank you very much, Chair. And it actually builds off on parts of the discussion about Tom's and the framework. One point I was looking at, I think just with the environmental aspects, I don't think there was enough of the environmental side. There was 1-2 questions. One of it, fair enough, had the carbon side of things on there. The other question, basically, do you have segregated recycling? Yes. Not even like how much have we dealt with, how much, just the kind of figures to signify, we have stopped, so much from, coming into the system in the first place. We have recycled so much. This is what we've been doing throughout the year. So it's different from a yes answer, which shows, well, yeah, it's not giving it a little bit more behind it on that side. But I suppose that's more of an observation rather than a question on that side. I think the main things for myself is mainly as well about this going back to the customer satisfaction. In the report, there's a lot about the financial side of things, which is fine. Obviously, that's part of the partnership and part of the joint venture. There's only a few bullet points about the customer. And I know in previous times, there's been a lot of things being taken on board about listening to feedback, about listening to complaints, about, coming back and feeding back about what has been done, over time, about addressing some of those points. And it's just about, how are we ensuring that we're addressing those engagement points? Because in the past engagements with yourselves and meetings, we know there's been issues of schools wanting to go on the service level agreements and things like that because of cost or because of reputation, because of other things, obviously that have gone through in the past. It's just to hear what has come from that, and have you seen any changes in the the last year and the last 2 years of that? And I know you said about the cleaning side of things, the cleaning SLA has improved. Can you give other examples of where there has been improvements in what I've asked for, please?
So if I outline initially, and I don't go into too much detail in this meeting, but there's a number of avenues where we see customer feedback. And sometimes the challenge is trying to collate those into one homogeneous stream, because we have to ask for these different places. So in our building maintenance side of the business, we do reactive repairs and maintenance, and also small, what we would call minor works projects, so replacing windows and stuff in schools. At the end of every job that runs through a help desk system, there is a feedback method within the PDA. So the operative on site goes and why is the plug say, and that then will go to the school with the PDA and say, would you like to provide some feedback? We're obviously aware that that relies on the individual completing the feedback. We do have instances where that comes back with some constructive feedback or something that needs to be addressed. Where that happens, that feeds directly into a help desk. Help desk manager picks that up and contacts the customer, what's gone wrong, and then liaises with the works project manager or the section manager who's dealing with that work. So on a reactive maintenance side of this, we try and capture customer feedback and data and resolve issues immediately in the moment. Outside of that, through our, obviously we if there are complaints, we take complaints, we manage through a complaints process, but they rely on somebody initiating that process themselves. Each year, it's currently running as we speak, we run an annual customer survey. So this is a QR code led survey that goes out to all of our customers, so all the schools, anyone's interacted with us in the past year, and they're asked to provide feedback on a set number of questions. The questions are things like, do you believe that your interaction with the group provides value for money? Would you provide this? Would you give more contracts to the service again? And they are set questions, and questions. But for the sake of maintaining be able to compare year on year with questions, we've kept the same level. That probably would be reviewed as part of the future thing, but again, that's in the future. That runs normally through October, end of November, depending on the response rate, which is normally quite low in fairness. We extend into December. There's lots of people who just write a couple of follow-up emails and they don't take the opportunity to feed back into us. But we like the running survey because those who want to feedback to us generally do, and then we're able to take that feedback and do something with it. We also engage with the council and a number of stakeholders and a number of different meetings. So I talked about the education liaison group earlier, and this is representatives from primary and secondary schools, so primary school head teachers, secondary school business managers, who feed into clusters, who feed into reps, who then bring issues to us, and it helps us to be able to gauge what's happening out in the market, as it were. In terms of examples of kind of increased satisfaction engagement, our customer service metrics, as they stand, and they broadly the same year on year. We haven't seen a massive uptick in fantastic feedback that's come back to that, or negative feedback. But the number of customers that are using this has been increasing. So we talked about cleaning a little bit just now. Had a number of schools who either self-delivered previously or one who was actually a third-party provider who come back into the SLA with us. And from my point of view, that sits in my area of business. And that's really positive to see. There's one school I've been coaching for a while, and we've managed to cover it, which is great. So that's fantastic news because we want to work with them. In terms of building maintenance and that side of our business, and in terms of number of customers in the schools, if you think of each school being a customer, that's a chunk of them. One of the finance lines of business, if you like, is what we term LMS, so locally managed schools. And that's where schools have discretionary budgets themselves, and they can choose where they spend it. So things like fair funding or centralised maintenance and stuff like that, obviously within the scheme that we operate on the council's behalf. Looking at schools are LMS, these where schools have the choice. Income, what our turnover in that area has been increasing year on year, which when we speak to schools is around them giving us more work and us delivering more on what we say we'll deliver, and that in turn forms more people to use us. It's a bit of a long answer, but I hope that.
That's great, thank you. It's just mainly on the fact of understanding as well, to what degree do we have the number of schools involved in SLAs? Is it quite a substantial take-up? You probably don't have the exact figure in mind, but just can you gauge with us what it's like?
Don't have it exactly to mind. Cleaning has improved, and actually we've done some work with council colleagues at Double Weston in education around it's going to sound like crews, apologies, for which schools are left, so which schools aren't with us, and where might they also be going. And the majority of the schools that are left are not part of us are self-delivering. When I speak to schools, that's often around their ability to in-house deliver and their relationships with people. That shouldn't change to working with us, and that's something we'll work on with them and explain 2 PM staff protected and such. I can provide that data off this meeting as to the number of schools in or out in each of the schemes. I don't have it to hand, but that's quite easy to find.
Do you want to just say majority, minority? Because
I can speak. Yeah, I can't remember the names off the top of my head. But cleaning is about 50-50.
Yeah.
So
that'll give a rep.
And that 50% remaining not fitting for those are from big schools self-delivering.
Thank you for that. And do you find in yourselves, is there any challenges within that that you've both, suffered, I'd not say suffer, but experienced, maybe is a better term, yourselves and or alongside the partnership with the council, and have addressed that? Can you give any demonstrations of that?
I think the challenge in the business's interaction with the councillors at the council is not necessarily one thing to us. It's not one client. It's a number of different clients, it's a number of different stakeholders at varying levels with varying influence, depending on the scenario. Our relationship with the client team, with Tracy and Dan Cook and Ms. Cornwall, is I think excellent. We have a really good working relationship, and it's through that then it's sometimes we reach into other parts of the council where maybe there's some confusion about roles, responsibilities, or who's engaged with what. So we use that as a funnel, as it were. We meet monthly as a group. At last Tuesday. And then we engage with other council stakeholders elsewhere, but lots of those stakeholders might be individuals. So an individual head teacher, person may be dealing with us, and it isn't necessarily so that they're outsourced cleaning, as an example. If some of their education as a whole would necessarily get involved in, so they may turn to their Western for advice, we'll be involved with them, the school will help triangulate, but our actual individual relationship is with the school itself. And that also varies here, building maintenance or even from the state's point of view and stuff.
That's great. Thank you very much for that. And the other point then is just basically linking in about the scope and scale of projects. And again, it's something as councillors, in our governor roles and things like that there, we sometimes hear about. And it's just about to what level of scope and size of projects can you fulfill internally? And then when does it become a challenge in that regard? Because, sometimes when we hear about projects, they have to wait, various amounts of time before they can be fulfilled. And is there, again, another part of the question, if you allow, is there a percentage that, in a rough guidance limit of from quote to actually going ahead with the works? Is there an ability to give us just a kind of rough guidance about what that take up is as well, please?
We're actually looking at the moment about how projects are delivered. Obviously, a lot of that in terms of timing of delivery of projects comes down to sort of the governance that the council has to get decisions through for projects to go ahead. We are looking at how we will deliver projects going forward. Obviously, every project is different. The scale of the project can be different depending on what it is. But obviously, there's things to address on both sides in terms of how a project can be delivered. Percentage-wise,
If we'd have to look at from a quote through to completion scale, I need to take that away and look at how we measure that. We might be able to do that through some of our works ordering system. I'm not sure whether we will look at that. In terms of that scope and scale stuff, I suppose it depends on the size of the project and what role we're playing. Because in some projects, so in schools, I call it a building maintenance project, replacing a number of windows, that can become quite chunky from a value point of view very quickly, depending on the size of the school. We may subcontract out that work and project manage it from a works project management point of view. We can self-deliver it, depending on the size and scale of it and the other works we have on. Where we come through to our larger construction projects, if you like, we might play various different roles depending on the needs of the council and council department stakeholders and the service that we're providing. So we may provide a fully managed project management service. We may just be providing quality surveying services as part of a wider project. Depends on how it ends the business and the needs of the council. But I think from a business point of view, we see that's one of our strengths, and that we can flex and we're multidisciplinary, so we can flex and coordinate and bring in different skills as and where we need to.
and having that judgment on each and every project, really. Some of it is a judgment call and how we proceed with certain projects.
Thank you. And I know, obviously, there's complexities to individual cases in a school that I'm a school governor on. Obviously, we're kind of combating is not probably the best term, but it's the only one I can think of at the second with, the kind of combating against CADU regulations and things like that. There about certain things to do up a school toilet, for example. Is there ways that you can demonstrate with us about the scope that you communicate well with, in this case, the customers or clients with the schools in order to take them on the journey? Because sometimes, as I said, from experience, it can be very complicated. Sometimes the schools are like, we don't know what's going on. We don't think Norse, has a kind of thing with it. They're not explaining it to us properly. Sometimes that's why they've gone kind of externally in that regard. So just to try and hear from yourselves in that perspective, how you feel with that and how about that customer journey is in relation to that type of project with the complexities.
Yeah, I think it's really a question of how the work comes into the business and how then that is resourced. We've had some instances where how work comes into us, then how that is then answered. And making sure that there's one point of contact, for example, in terms of the communication. And communication is really key. And sometimes we can get sucked into actually delivering the project. We're not talking to the customer or the client. And sometimes there's lots of people involved in one project. There needs to be one key lead sometimes, is what we've learned on some sites recently with some of the work that we've undertaken. Things can get quite messy if there's sort of too many points of contact. So I think that's something that's probably taken away from projects, and that as a business, we need to sort of slow down. The project comes in, who's the lead, who's the point of contact, and that communication needs to be kept up all the way through. And like I say, sometimes that that can be forgotten, but that is something that we keep working on really. But like I said, I think he's keen how it comes into the business and how it's then resourced following its introduction into the business and the workflow.
Thank you. And I know, obviously, you know, so some of the things I'm interested in as committee members know is about technology and things like that, then the ever increasing and betterness of technology and integration with AI, and about communication, as you said, and about, you know, certain stages of project work, where they are. Does the customer, you know, if they log in, will they be able to see it? There's a lot of this going on in the private sector generally about projects. Is that being adhered to within the public, for example? It'd be interesting to hear alongside that. But also, looking at the satisfaction side of things, you know, on the latter part, and I know there was about the feedback is 90% positive. It's just wondering, is that evaluated or audited with anyone else? Is council looking at that? Does council look at, you know, the feedback in terms of complaints and positivities? Is there anyone kind of going in just to make sure that, you know, we are basically feeling the ground, you know, as much as we can? It's not just particular questions and surveys, things like that there, that we are really finding out what the you know, the feedback that's, you know, what we require and what we need is coming out of the surveys, etc.
If I just jump in there, so in terms of the feedback that we receive, so we have a quarterly board, company board set up that's in two parts. First part is the liaison board, and that's where lots of the work happens, as it were. That makeup of that board are senior council officers, so Tracy, senior stakeholders, Deb Weston, but also our company board members. So these are the directors of the business and company's house. One of whom is Reece Cornwall, another one who is the deputy leader, Deb Davis. They both sit on the board and act those liaison boards, and then the full board which follows it. There's a report that we produce every quarter, and a big chunk of that is around quality. So our quality, the sort of feedback that we take from sites as we complete jobs, details of complaints, what the complaint was, what the resolution was, and also compliments. So where we have feedback from customers that is positive, we report that at board level. We also take that and do a bunch of things, like celebration of staff and stuff. Every quarter we have a celebration lunch where we invite staff in with compliments, additional introduction, we talk through kind of why they've been recognised, job that was. And we've been trying to get a little event of celebrating kind of the good stuff where it happens. That gets reported every quarter. And that then feeds into our balance scorecard, which then we report every month at our clients.
And I guess from a council perspective, if I come in on that, obviously this is part of scrutiny of the performance. So this is a really important part of that. We meet jointly with the cabinet member regularly, so there's some kind of more regular conversations there. There's the board setup and there's those regular customer meetings. And important to say, to go back to that point about the council being quite a complex customer, like with loads of different people, and the right people come to those meetings. So, for example, other parts of North do a lot of work for housing and on the kind of regulatory stuff. So the head of service for housing and communities would come along to that meeting and you know, address any issues or give positive feedback, you know, which is it's both ways, isn't it? And always someone from education attends, always someone from finance to work with Norse's opposite number. So lots of different people come into that kind of setup, really, to just emphasise what that looks like.
Thank you, Tracy. And it also encourages just to have that confidence, obviously, that has been addressed, but also more so, as you said, it's always a thing, you know, we always hear about the negativities, and it's very rare, unless you kind of poke and prod a little bit to get an actual, you know, give us a compliment, you know, tell us what we're doing right, because they don't come, you know, forthwith. It's always the complaints that come thick and fast. Unfortunately, it's just the nature of what happens. And Tracy, I know you mentioned about the cabinet member. I don't know if the cabinet member wants to come in her eyes from what she's seen. You know, if she wants to indicate as well about, you know, what work she's been undertaking maybe within the period that she's been in office at all.
Councillor Howell.
Yeah, thanks. That's quite a big question, Councillor Marshall. Thank you for that. Yeah, so as Tracy says, we have regular briefing meetings, and that sort of gives me the updates that I need on projects that are being considered. You know, there is a focus on estate management of assets, but then we also have speakers who come in and talk about how the cleaning is working. So, for example, that discussion we just had about which schools are and aren't using the cleaning services of Norse, why that might be. Like for example, we had quite a big discussion the other day about school janitors and caretakers, and when schools are choosing to take them up, when they aren't, what Norse might be offering that's above and beyond perhaps just a school's in-house janitor. So we do get into quite a lot of detail in that regard. And we're constant. For example, we've been having discussions about how we can make information more publicly available through Norse and through the council. So we've been having discussions, which I'm very keen on, of, for example, producing an asset list in due course, which we're all working on, which and also developing, a more accessible online system, perhaps by way of GIS. But, I also like the idea of what you were saying about a sort of online estate management software, the sort of updates in real time, although that's probably more of something that would feed into the new model. I expect that would be the right moment to do that rather than beforehand. But they are all discussions that are being had on a regular basis. But what I'd also say is, if for all ward members really, if there are sort of specific cases and concerns, I'm always happy to hear them and have those discussions with Tracy and with Norse and feedback, because I think we all of us, within Norse and officers and myself, it can be good to get the feedback that way, I think, and sometimes you can sort of deal with things a bit more effectively, or become a bit more aware of patterns of problems that I think sometimes surveys maybe don't pick up in quite the same way. I think, for example, if two ward members came to me with very similar issues with a particular process, I think that is enough then to start delving into it with Norse, who probably will have a good reason for that, or it might be something they can look at. But, so I would definitely encourage that, because we speak all the time. We have very regular meetings, and, sometimes I think it is true that what we lack is that real feedback rather than those who are willing to answer a questionnaire.
Thanks, Councillor Howells. Councillor Marshall, did you want to come back with anything?
Yeah, it's just a thank you also to the cabinet member, and it's just one of those things to add in as well. It's really positive to hear about those, what seemingly is a frank discussions and things like that from all levels, from the political leadership to the council officers to Norse themselves. To really have that engagement, and it's something that I've learned in another committee of people, that the officers know our schools. They really know, down to the detail of, pretty much if there's a tile that needs replacement near enough, that the school knows about it. So it sounds like this is also occurring within the partnership. There's a lot of things together, and that partnership is quite strong and able to rebuttal a lot of things, and understands what, as you said about the cleaners and that, knowing which schools as well, what the take up is. And I'm sure, the schools we mentioned quite a lot on this committee meeting today, but I'm aware as the cabinet member, there's a lot of stuff in the background about our civic buildings and things like that there that we need to attend to. There's a lot of project work that goes behind the scenes that's not always seen, but needs to be attended to. So it's really good to hear that there's various things on the go for more different levels in that regard, in that side. I do have two other questions or areas, Chair, if you're happy for me to go on to them, or if anyone wants to come in before that.
There's no other hands up at the moment, so yeah, feel free.
Happy to proceed. Thank you, Chair. So it's just about the with upcoming changes, just to find out from yourselves at the moment, are the strategies and the right people in place, both sides of the partnership, to make sure the readiness to move forward and mitigate any risks, ensuring as smooth as possible transfer to the local authority trading companies had. Do we feel that we've got all the pieces on the board that we need?
Don't want to lose the mess, as it were, out of it at the end.
Yeah, I think, we've been very well engaged by Newport for a long period of time. It's been a big, long run in, and we've still got sort of a long way to go until the new entity commences. We're on the project team, and then we've got members on the project board, and there's clear sort of guidelines as to what the team is to produce and what the team is for, as opposed to what the board is for. And I think that, we're very well engaged. Obviously, the council has also put on board some consultants who are also engaging with us for that additional external advice. And we're all very much working together for the sort of end goal. Like I say, there's peaks and troughs in that. It's not an easy process to go through. It's a big thing that the council are embarking on in setting up this new model. But I think all the right people are in place to do that. And like I say, there is that engagement, which I think is really important. We're very much bought into it, and we're being taken along the journey with the council and actively participating in that as well. I don't know, Jake, if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, I think that's fair. It's a unique, to facing close, but it's a unique position to be in, because this affects the business that we run and the organisation that we help to manage. It also affects us as individuals, because the setup of what we do for work and how it operates. And it's great to be at the table and to have input and influence and to be engaged in that. And that also brings some challenges, in that it's the big thing we're doing, with a lot of responsibility with it. And the council and council colleagues have been really open about that and be really sensitive to that. So from our point of view, that's positive.
If I can come in as well, that's a really, really good question, because that does affect the current performance of the company, actually. So Reece also goes along to the all staff, because it's really important the managers are engaged, but I was just looking at the number, is it 325 staff who are watching this closely, who are all employed, and we don't want to lose the goodwill or skills and knowledge of that body of people. So Reece goes along to those staff meetings, those all company staff meetings, whenever there are major decisions, and not everything can be done jointly. When there are major decisions, we go out and talk directly to the guys about that before that kind of becomes public through cabinet reports, for example, perhaps on the day the report's released. And I think what's really pleasing, so we are working with a small amount of consultancy of people who've done it before, in both this, in a Norse model, and in other similar, bringing one LATCO, as it's called, into another. And they've actually remarked to us that it is quite unusual to do it in such close partnership, and that can bring tensions and challenges. But we all try and be as mature as we can, and try really hard to maintain the relationships in that way. But that is unusual, and it is common for kind of the council to just do it to the organisation, which I think we would lose a great deal of knowledge, not to mention goodwill. And maybe we'd get there a bit faster, but that isn't necessarily the right approach, and not the one we've chosen. So thanks for feedback there. It's really helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah,
and I know
sorry, Councillor, before you move on, I was just going to sort of mention there that as a committee, we have discussed beforehand that obviously with the transition, we're very aware that it's going to have a big impact on a lot of people, and we're not going to be asking for any details about the individual circumstances, if you like, but obviously these questions are just generally about the transition and the risks associated with it. I mean, I was going to ask a question, but I've got a feeling you're going to ask something very similar, Councillor Marshall, so I'll let you go first.
If you
Maybe
want to
I'll
go,
go
Chair,
back.
that's fine. I'm just writing up some notes a second, so you go ahead, Chair.
Well, Tracy's already sort of partially mentioned it, but I was going to ask what sort of things are planned over this, because I mean, this time next year, basically, we're going to be in the final stages of that transition into the LATCO. So I was just wondering what have you got planned over the next year now to make sure that standards are maintained for service users and that there is a smooth transition? And have you identified any sort of major risks associated with this transition?
The biggest risk comes with uncertainty. That uncertainty may lead concern. So it would be a reasonable risk for us to think through if staff were unsettled, would they make other choices, with other opportunities for themselves, would they towards something that is maybe more certain, because there will be a period where that is uncertain whilst it's worked through. Mm-hmm. Our mitigation, our risk mitigation around that is communication, as openly and as regularly as we can, to celebrate the wins and give good news where we can, but also to explain to people that sometimes we're not quite there yet. So we're having lots of discussions around fleet as an example of how that might work. And that's not a problem. It's just not finished yet. And it's been really open about that. Tracy talked about Reece coming to our whole staff briefing, so a couple of times a year. Normally May and December, we've moved them around a little bit around major milestones we've passed. We get as many people as we can into a venue. Look in Newport, and then we have a bit of an update. So from the business as to what performance has been like, what's been happening, new starters, leavers, and things like that. But also there's a slot there for council colleagues to come along and talk, people to ask questions and stuff. Invariably, what happens is that council colleagues then leave. There's more questions given that because I don't want to hold my hand up in public and ask. We take those and feed us back to the project team, project board, so that we can provide answers to people have specific concerns. I know the council are also maintaining an FAQ link, so at any point at the moment, any of our colleagues outside of communicating with us can drop in questions.
You just want to explain FAQ?
Sorry, frequently asked questions. So it's a link that's being maintained by the council where colleagues can submit questions. It goes to the project team, the project board, and then as they are answered and updated, they're released then back into the staff group. There's a big list of you've asked, and this is the current situation there. That's the big thing for us at the moment is continuing to deliver services as we do and continue to improve as we normally would plan to. But the big risk in that is just around uncertainty and trying to, and that's our responsibility as managers of the business, but also as part of the project report is to allay concerns where we can, where they exist.
Yeah, and we give the staff the information that we can give at the time we can give it. It's that message that yes, whilst this is going on in the background and there is some change to come, it is business as usual. There is still an existing business to run currently, and obviously everyone's got their role to play in that. Obviously, all of that will condense down and become more intense as we get closer to the date, and obviously we'll have to continually manage that. For this financial year, obviously up until March, it's very much business as usual. I think then for the preceding sort of 9 months, then up until the end, that will become far more apparent as more and more decisions are made. And obviously there's more work to be done in the setup of the new entity to determine what that looks like as well. We don't know all of the answers yet. So like I say, it's that uncertainty, like I say, that we obviously have to manage as a senior management team and as a business in order to maintain the continuity currently as well.
Yeah.
So
culturally as well, we're very as open as we can be. It's not there's no offices, nobody sits in an office in Newport North. All of us sit out with everyone else. So if there's questions or come through our concerns, it comes through conversation, and we're very, very open as a management team, aren't we?
Yeah, we're very communicative with our staff generally. As managers, we have one-to-ones, we have team meetings, we often get together, and if there are questions to be asked, there was an open forum for people to ask those. We do our voice as well. I think it's worth mentioning.
Which is an employee for every quarter.
That where somebody comes to represent a certain area of business, and they can probably ask a question that maybe somebody else is a bit nervous to ask, they can just get it out there and say, you know what, this is sort of the talk amongst the staff. It might be a bit of a myth busting session, but it's a really good and a really relaxed way of somebody being able to come forward and come out and sort of ask maybe those difficult questions that they're concerned about.
I'm glad you said there's such a focus on communication, because I know from a bit of experience, there's nothing worse than just not knowing what's going on. That uncertainty is the worst feeling.
And I think a couple of us that are in senior management team as well were part of the joint venture that was created in 2014. So we were part of that transfer. So we were obviously affected then by that. So I'd like to think that there's lessons learned in how we now will deliver this to how that was done, and drawing on experience from that sort of past transfer that we were involved in. So that does.
And it's something that's sort of quite formal and informal.
Yeah.
As well. The only thing I wanted to add to that then was, have you also got sort of anonymous routes of? I mean, you mentioned some people not like put their hand up in public. Have you got ways that people can ask questions anonymously or confidentially?
FAQ link in the application is anonymous, so if you ask a question, it comes into that way. But that's also why we've set up so it's fully formed into the quarters, so it says. And I think the trick with those is often encouraging the right volunteers there who are vocal. You want that challenge, you want that ability, because if I am sitting in a department, maybe I wouldn't want to ask that, but I can talk to my colleague about it, and they can say, I'm hearing a concern of X, Y, and Z, or somebody's fed back to this. What we talk about it. There's lots of stuff that we discuss into there. It also forms the Health and Safety Committee, and we want individuals in that who are quite engaged and quite, I use the word challenging, because you want that kind of robust conversation.
Yeah.
Because that's another way of somebody putting their query forward without having to put themselves forward, because that can be uncomfortable for some individuals.
All right, thanks. I can see the cabinet member's got a hand up as well. So, Councillor Harrells.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to sort of add to what's been said, really, that, I've seen throughout the process how sensitively it's all been handled, and how, how much genuine care and consideration is being given on both sides, both by the council and by representatives of Norse, to make sure that the transition's done sensitively and as transparently as these things can possibly be done. So, I just, I want to extend my thanks for all the care and thought that's been put into it. And as we were talking as well, people can also be affected by the way the new processes work as well. And, I think this is a good opportunity as things move forward to also think about how in a new model, additional social value can be added, new processes as well. Like, for example, what Councillor Marshall suggested, with the sort of estate management program that's accessible to all. Thoughts and ideas like that, especially if they've got social value at both ends, both for the customer, whoever that may be, and the employees of the new version of Newport North, they can be so valuable. So I think ensuring that those ideas are heard and given due consideration at this stage, and this is the stage to do it, so I think it's also just a point that where there are good ideas, it's really important they get filtered in at this point and heard, and I think they will be. Thank you.
Councillor.
And also,
Thank you.
sorry, because I'm going to have to duck out at this point. So apologies for that, but thank you to everyone.
No, thanks for attending. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Ian.
Councillor Marshall.
Thank you very much again, Chair. And just as what the cabinet member was saying, really, and about the environmental side of things is important, and about maybe where it feeds from basically the quote to the finished completion, how much carbon and etc. to give them the journey, so they're able to make that decision and be forthwith and public about what their impact is as well would be good. But moving on to the other parts, and before I actually move on to that, what I was going to say, Chair, before obviously yourself there was about the staff staff journey, it's important to make sure, you know, within this joint journey in the partnership that we are looking, you know, after the staff, and we all have the staff in mind as they're progressing towards this transfer. And just, you know, whether, you know, we can keep appraised with that, you know, if and when, and if there's, you know, anything else on that side. But I'm sure, you know, the process will go happily with and smoothly, you know, with the experience before, but hopefully go through to make sure that they are very much supported. And it sounds like they have an open forum, which is really, really good in that aspect, and other sources if they want to, you know, if they have concerns on a one-to-one basis as well, which is positive on that side. I think the question that the chair was potentially alluding, we spoke in pre-meeting, is just basically with the upcoming changes, obviously from one to another in this transfer. I think it's more of a question of reassurance that basically projects will not falter. So like when, you know, any projects that are taken on or due to be taken on, if needs be, they won't fall by the wayside, that there will still be some ways of administrating them through. And if you can maybe make a point about that, just about the medium or long-term projects and about how they would likely be transferred over, because I think, you know, within, you know, us as councillors, maybe people watching, schools and things like that, they will be looking and maybe have that kind of, oh, hang on, let's hold off because we don't know what's going on that side. So it's just, if you can reassure us that you know, projects won't get lost, essentially, please.
And what's to take on?
That forms part of the demobilisation process for the current business. So Newport North is a separately legal entity, it's part of the North Group. The North Group obviously set up and then return these joint ventures to councils in various forms. So they're quite skilled at doing that. One of our colleagues, Mark Sweeney, he's focused on that kind of in its entirety, that demobilisation programme and how that gets carried through into the new thing. At the moment, the end date for the current arrangements at the end of December 2025, and actually that lends itself quite well to smaller projects, because our experience is that schools don't necessarily start works projects over Christmas because they already shut down. They run up through December as it's nativity place and schools are very, very busy for obvious reasons. So actually the bulk of our work gets done in half terms, Easter and summer holidays important. So Christmas is a naturally quieter period where we wouldn't necessarily be under any massive impetus to start new things. There will be things that will have started before and will need to be done 100%. And it's just around how we program and manage those so that when the transfer happens, the staff do be transferred, and that's I say it's quite simple, but we do that regularly. No concerns there. It's how we then manage those programs. I completely agree. But there are people who are focused entirely on that now as we go forward.
I guess I come in on that as well, Chair. So there's a mobilisation piece and a demobilisation piece. There's obviously some work as we get closer to work with key clients, because they are wider. We focus a lot tonight on schools, but actually there'd be a much wider set of clients. So making sure those clients feel reassured. And you know, there's a whole programme of work with a number of work streams about how we work with staff, how we set up the new company, but also how we manage those ongoing programs of work, not just projects, actually, and new, if you like, new pieces of business, but all of those important ongoing things, you know, maintenance over that period, emergencies over that period, cleaning and caretaking over that period. It all needs to just carry on. So we're working really hard on plans there. Clearly, it's going to be a really big change and a challenging time, but we're working very hard on bringing all of that together.
Thanks. Just for those online, Reese has just joined us. I mean, please feel free to come and join us, Reese.
Apologies, Chair, we've asked him.
It's all your fault.
Well, obviously.
Councillor Marshall, you still going?
I'm still going. I've got one more, Chair. Thank you very much. And it's positive to have that reassurance, because it's one thing that we can go back as school governors and things and just, you know, not have that concerns of back and forth, like, oh, hang on and things like that. There will be an orderly transition, you know, when it comes to time, and you know, a positively smooth transfer, hopefully with you all as staff as well. My question and it will be a last question from myself, what lessons have been learned throughout the partnership, and what lessons have been learned in terms of what would you potentially have changed? So we talked about maybe the model itself had been ones, but is there any other things that you would like to mention about how you think in hindsight things could have been maybe a little bit different and things like that there, to kind of give us ideas of moving forward? I know it's probably you've already aired them elsewhere, but it'd be just interesting to hear what you would have to say about how in hindsight would you change anything else there. Thank you.
Shall I start then? Kind of, Sarah, I know you were there at that time, so I don't want to tread on that. It's interesting about the we've talked a lot tonight about the if you like profit model, but I think for a very long period that was the desired model and worked really well. So I think we've probably outgrown that as an organisation. I don't know if that is a particular lesson learned. I think there is something about 10 years on, it's time for change. But I do know, because working on the project and programme, that there are other things that if we were starting again, and we kind of are and aren't, we would do differently. There's certain systems that could work better, some automation I think that could work better, that we now have the opportunity to address. But I'll respect Sarah's view because you were here from the start.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest thing, and it's not criticism of anything, it's just something that's come out over the 10 years and keeps sort of cropping up, is the understanding of what Norse is and what its role is, as opposed to the council. And that clearly, the message maybe from 2014 didn't quite fully get out to everybody what this partnership was for and the roles and responsibilities of each party to that partnership. And I think what I'd like to see in the new thing is that there's a clear understanding of what the LATCO is for and what its role and responsibility is going forward. I think the other thing to reflect on as well, and I think it's come out in terms of the message from today, is that profit is a really key measure, isn't it? It's a very easy measure. If the business has made money, it's a really positive measure that you can put out there, and it's a nice round number, and everyone understands it. Social value is another one, and there's different ways of looking at what social value is and how that is measured. But there's the added value that I think Norse brings to projects that we probably don't promote. It is happening, but we don't probably capture it or promote it in a good enough way, and maybe not at all in some cases. I was talking to a colleague the other day about money saved on the project because of the support Norse gave, and sort of how do we actually promote that in a sort of facts and figures that somebody can understand and absorb. And I think profit is going to be different in the new thing. We've got to get better at how we promote the added value that model can bring. And like I said, I think that's something we maybe have missed along the way. We've recognised that. We've said to ourselves, we're not good at promoting the good stuff we do. I think there needs to be a bit more of that, and I think that would get an even better understanding of what Norse does and all the services it does provide. It's not just about getting a fee and making profit out of those jobs. There's other added benefits that need to be visible.
I think I'd probably echo some of that, to be honest. Well, sorry, Councillor Marshall, but there's so many parallels there between Norse and the council itself as well. I know my perception of Norse before I became elected compared to what I've learned since I've become elected, two very different things. So that communication at the beginning, as you say, that perception of what people actually do.
Yeah, and
promoting, I think the good things you do, again, the council sometimes isn't very good at promoting what it does and the good it does. People only ever see the problems.
Like you said, that initial perception then kind of feeds into opinion as well, doesn't it? So people have formed an opinion before maybe they've got the full knowledge of what it is.
Yeah. Sorry, Councillor Marshall, you were about to say something there.
Yeah, thank you. Just observation what was said, and thank you very much for that answer. It's really good. And I think from the report, if you don't mind me saying, I think you undersell the indirect measures that you have as well and social impact. There's a lot about the social impact that you do directly as part of the TOMS, but also the wider area. And I don't think that comes out clearly that there's a direct and indirect impact, and some of that you did allude to. But it's just whether or not if it can be sold a little bit more in any future reports and things moving forward, because things do have that, and it's really interesting sometimes to be able to hear that as local authorities, about when we're talking to residents about what impacts we have and what values we're trying to instill in any contract, things like that. It's so vital and so important. So I take that on board, and thank you very much there.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. I can't see any other hands up at the moment. Anybody else got any questions or comments before we summarise everything? I mean, Reece, I know you've really just come in. I don't know whether you wanted to say anything before we wrap up. Or
No,
we all spot that. Sorry.
apologies, not really aware of, the conversation that's gone on. I'm really grateful to Jake and Sarah for coming along this evening to present, and I think it's a good experience, both of you. Thank you very much for that. I probably, it's interesting that question about, lessons learned. It's really, I suppose, some of the challenges around that are that the world today doesn't look like it did in 2014, and actually, sometimes it's not about lessons learned. It's about, you would make different decisions in a different set of circumstances about what you did. But broadly, the joint venture has done what it was set out to do. It took a quite fragile property services and turned it into quite a robust entity that actually returns money back to the people in Newport to invest in other services. And that's the reality. Is we talk about profit, but actually what we get in return that actually we use to fund other services. So from that point of view, it's been very successful. But the new model will look and operate differently.
Yeah,
as it goes in the future, because the world has now changed.
Thanks, Reece. Well, can I just thank Sarah and Jake for your time. Really appreciate that, answering all the questions. Can I just ask for 5 more minutes of your time? We're just going to formulate all the comments and make sure that you're happy with everything that's we said. So, Neil, I'll hand over to you.
Thanks very much, Chair. Notes are taken that the committee requested to find out what percentage of clients were in the survey sample. In the report, comment from Councillor Davis that they'd like to see within the nationalities list how many of the nationalities there were. Councillor Marshall made a comment within the Tom section about the recycling. They have systems in place to source segregated recycling of different waste streams. By providing specific information regarding things like how much waste have been diverted from landfill. Is that something that you requested for the future report, Councillor?
Sorry, Neil, I had a bit of a glitch there. Can you please repeat? I apologise.
So you mentioned that in relation to the TOMs, have systems in place for source segregated recycling of the different waste streams. Did you request for the future report to have more specific information?
Yeah, sorry, no, it was. It's basically there was just a yes answer. So it's just basically a bit more quantified in order to give us a bit more of what impact rather than just a yes answer.
Just to say on that, we'll consider it, but I'm not really sure. We've set. There's allegedly the responsibility here. I'm not really sure we're going to have mechanisms in place for measuring the amount of waste we divert from recycling.
The framework.
We will.
So it is the estimate answer.
Yeah,
but we could look to provide more data.
Yeah, we'll
outside of that.
Yeah, I captured it slightly different if that's helpful. That it'd be useful to see stronger information and dialogue about some of the climate, which I think someone else made the same point about climate change, net zero type things, which I think we could expand on that.
Yeah,
That's all.
And also Councillor Marshall's comment that be clear in the report about the direct and indirect impact. Was there any other comments or recommendations in relation to the report the committee would like to make?
I'll take that as a no. Everyone happy with those comments? Okay, that's lovely. Again, thank you very much, both. You're free to go. Thank you. Oh, yeah, you're free to go as well. I didn't think you'd need telling. Right, so item 4 on the agenda then is just very quickly went through scrutiny advisor reports, actions arising. So Neil.
Thanks very much, Chair. Just to update the committee, the comments and recommendations that were made at the previous meeting in relation to the joint patch report, they've all been passed on to Natasha. I've chased these up for comment. Next 2 meetings for the committee The 4th of December, we'll be discussing the violence against women, domestic abuse and sexual violence. This normally comes to us as an annual report. Been advised by Amy that we'll be looking at this year will be the annual report more basically on the training. As soon as we get some more information, we'll be able to provide it to the committee. Then on the 5th of February, we got the contest, which is counter-terrorism. Again, I'll be able to give the committee more information when it's available. Police and civil contingencies have been providing the information for this at the meeting. And that's everything on my agenda.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Neil. So the last item on the agenda then is the minutes of the previous meeting. I'm assuming everyone's read them. Has everyone got any comments? Everyone happy to accept those?
Except
It helps, Chair, I move.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Marshall and Councillor Hughes. We've got a move and a seconder. That's all done. That's fantastic. Before I say meeting closed, because I did that last time and Neil corrected me. Thank you for sending my signature. In that case, meeting closed. Thank you very much for your time, everyone. Thanks.
Good night.
Bye all.